I remember that night very clearly, even though many years have passed since then. I was living alone in a small house far out in the countryside. The house stood by itself, surrounded by fields that stretched out in every direction. There were no close neighbors, no streetlights, and no noise except the wind and the sounds of insects at night. I liked the quiet at first. It made me feel calm and safe. But over time, that quiet started to feel different. I had moved there for college. The place was cheap, and I did not mind being alone. My days were simple. I went to class, came home, ate, and studied. At night, I stayed inside. The darkness outside felt too deep, like it swallowed everything. I always locked my doors before the sun went down. The house was old, but it was still in good shape. The floors creaked sometimes, and the windows rattled when the wind was strong. I got used to those sounds. They felt normal. What did not feel normal was the feeling I started getting after a few weeks. At first, it was small. I would be sitting at my desk, reading, and I would suddenly feel like I was not alone. It was not a sound or a movement. It was just a feeling. I would look around, but there was nothing there. The room would be empty, just like always. I told myself it was nothing. I thought maybe I was just tired or stressed. I tried to ignore it. But the feeling came back again and again. It started happening more at night. I would be lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I would feel like something was watching me. My chest would feel tight, and I would not want to move. I would listen carefully, but all I could hear was the quiet. One night, I got up and checked the whole house. I turned on every light and looked in every corner. I opened closets, checked under the bed, and even looked outside through the windows. There was nothing. After that, I started keeping more lights on at night. It made me feel a little better. A few days later, something changed. I came home from class in the evening. The sun was already low, and the sky was turning dark. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. At first, everything looked normal, but then I noticed something small. A chair in the living room was slightly out of place. I stopped and looked at it. I always kept things neat. I knew where everything was. The chair was not where I had left it that morning. I stood there for a long time, trying to remember. I tried to convince myself that I had moved it and just forgot. That felt like the only answer that made sense. I pushed the chair back into its place and tried to forget about it. That night, I could not sleep well. Every small sound made me open my eyes. The feeling of being watched was stronger than before. It felt closer. The next morning, I told myself I needed to be more careful. I started paying attention to everything. Before leaving the house, I made sure everything was in its place. I looked at each room slowly and tried to remember how it looked. When I came back that evening, I checked again. At first, everything looked fine. Then I saw it. A small picture frame on the wall was tilted. It was not a big change, but I knew I had left it straight. My heart started beating faster. I walked closer and stared at it. My hands felt cold. I fixed it and stepped back. That was when I started to feel scared for real. I checked the doors and windows. They were all locked. There were no signs that anyone had come inside. I spent that night sitting in my bed, awake, listening. I did not turn off the lights. I just sat there, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. But the feeling stayed. The next few days were worse. Small things kept changing. A cup would be in a different place. A book would not be where I left it. Once I found a door slightly open when I was sure I had closed it. Each time I tried to find a reason. I told myself I was just forgetting. I told myself I was making mistakes. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night, I decided to test it. Before going to bed, I placed a chair directly in front of my bedroom door. I pushed it tight against the door so it could not move easily. If someone tried to open the door, the chair would fall. Then I lay down on my bed and waited. The room was silent. The air felt heavy. I did not know how long I stayed awake. It felt like hours. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. I woke up suddenly. I did not know why. The room was still lit. The lights were still on. I looked at the door. The chair was not there anymore. It was pushed to the side. My whole body went cold. I sat up slowly, staring at the door. The door itself was still closed. I had no memory of moving the chair. I had no memory of waking up during the night. But the chair had moved. I did not get out of bed. I stayed there, frozen, until morning. When the sun came up, I felt a little better. The light made everything feel normal again. I got out of bed and looked around the room. Nothing else was out of place. I went through the rest of the house. Everything looked normal. That made it worse. It felt like whatever had happened was careful, like it only moved what it needed to. That day, I decided to check something I had not checked before: the crawl space under the house. There was a small door outside that led under the house. I had never opened it before. I always thought it was just empty space. I walked outside slowly. The air was cold, and the ground felt hard under my feet. I stood in front of the small door and stared at it. It looked old. I reached down and opened it. A dark space stretched inside. I could smell dirt and something else I could not name. I got a flashlight and pointed it inside. The light moved across the ground. At first, I saw nothing. Then I saw marks, lines in the dirt. They looked like something had been moving there, not once, but many times. The marks went deeper into the darkness. My hands started shaking. I leaned closer and looked carefully. There were more signs. Small pieces of trash, an old bottle, something that looked like cloth, things that did not belong there. That was when I understood. I was not alone in that house. I backed away slowly and closed the small door. My heart was beating so fast that I felt dizzy. I went back inside and locked every door. I sat in the living room and tried to think. Nothing made sense. There was no way someone could be living under the house without me knowing. But the marks were there. That night, I did not go to bed. I sat in a chair, holding my phone, waiting for morning. Every sound made me jump. At some point I heard it, a soft sound. It came from the floor, like something moving slowly under the house. I held my breath and listened. The sound stopped. Then it started again, slow, careful, like it knew I was there. I did not move. I did not make a sound. I just sat there, feeling like something was right below me. When the sun finally came up, I left the house. I packed only what I needed. I did not go back inside after that. I never returned to that place again. I never told anyone the full story. Even now, I still think about it sometimes. I think about the quiet. I think about the small changes. And I think about what was living under that house. The worst part is not knowing how long it had been there, or how long it had been watching me. I traveled to Japan many years ago for work. I was a structural engineer, and I was studying how concrete breaks down near the ocean. My research was very slow and detailed, but it gave me a chance to visit a place most people never see. I was allowed to go to a small abandoned island off the coast. The island was covered in old concrete buildings that had been empty for a long time. It looked like a broken city sitting alone in the water. I remember feeling excited when I arrived. I had studied places like this for years, but seeing it in real life felt different. The buildings were tall, packed close together, and slowly falling apart. The air smelled like salt and rust. The ground was hard and uneven. Everything felt quiet in a way that did not feel natural. I was not alone. Someone was there to guide me, but I did not feel like I needed help. I was focused on my work. I had my tools, my notes, and my camera. I wanted to record everything. The first part of the visit felt normal. I walked through open areas, took pictures, and wrote down what I saw. The damage to the buildings matched what I expected. After some time, I entered one of the larger buildings. It used to be a place where people lived. The stairs were still there, but they looked weak. I moved carefully as I went up. The higher I went, the quieter it became. Even the sound of the wind faded away. On one of the upper floors, I noticed something strange. The floor was covered in dust, thick and untouched, but there was a path through it. It was not clean, but it was clear enough to see. Something had moved there more than once. The dust was disturbed in a steady line that led down the hallway. I stopped and stared at it. My first thought was that it could be from a long time ago. Maybe someone had walked there before the island was closed. But the pattern felt wrong. It did not look old. It looked repeated. I followed the path slowly. Each step I took felt louder than it should. The hallway felt longer than it looked. At the end, there was a small room. The door was slightly open. I pushed it gently. The air inside felt different. It was warmer than the rest of the building. That made no sense to me. There was no sunlight reaching inside. The walls should have been cold like everything else. I placed my hand on one wall, and I felt the warmth clearly. There was also a smell. I could not explain it. It was not like rot, not like animals, not like anything I knew. It felt wrong in a way I could not describe. I stood there for a moment, trying to understand what I was feeling. I left the room and went back down. The rest of the visit continued, but my focus was gone. I started noticing more small things, marks on walls that did not look like damage, areas where dust was disturbed in strange ways. Nothing clear, but enough to make me uneasy. As time passed, the feeling grew stronger. The island did not feel empty anymore. It felt like something was just out of sight. I kept looking over my shoulder without knowing why. Later, I entered another building. This one was taller and more damaged. The inside felt darker. The stairs were narrow, and the air felt heavy. I moved slowly, holding the railing as I climbed. When I reached one of the upper floors, I saw something that made my chest tighten. In one of the rooms, there was a small pile of objects, old bottles, some cloth, and pieces of material placed together. It did not look random. It looked like someone had been there. I stood still for a long time. My mind tried to explain it. Maybe it was very old. Maybe it had been left behind before the island was abandoned. But something about it felt recent. That was when I noticed something else. The silence had changed. Before, the building had been completely still. Now, there was a faint sound somewhere behind me. It was soft and slow. It sounded like movement. I did not turn around. I felt my body react before my mind could. My heart started beating faster. My hands felt cold. I knew something was wrong, but I did not want to confirm it. I stepped out into the hallway again. The space felt tighter now. The light felt weaker. I started walking back toward the stairs. My steps were careful, but I was moving faster than before. Then I saw the stairwell. It was blocked. There was a pile of broken concrete and debris covering the way down. It had not been there before, I knew that. I had come up through that same path without any problem. For a moment, I could not think. Then I turned and walked the other way. My breathing became louder. The hallway felt like it was stretching. Every door I passed looked the same. I tried to stay calm, but my body would not listen. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. They were behind me. Slow, uneven, not matching my pace. I kept walking, then I started moving faster. The sound followed. It did not rush. It stayed steady, like it knew where I was going. I turned a corner and kept going. My mind was no longer focused on anything except leaving. I did not care about the building, the research, or the danger of the structure. I only wanted to get out. The footsteps were still there. Then I noticed something worse. There was more than one. The sounds overlapped slightly. Not loud, but enough to understand. I was not alone in that building. I kept moving. The hallway turned again, and finally I saw another stairwell. I did not stop to check it. I went straight down. Each step felt like it would break, but I did not slow down. The sounds behind me did not follow down the stairs, but I could still feel something above. When I reached the ground level, I moved quickly toward the open space outside. The light from outside felt too bright after the darkness. I stepped out of the building and kept walking until I was far enough away. Only then did I stop. I turned back slowly. The building stood still, quiet, and empty. There was no movement in the windows. No sound came from inside. It looked exactly the same as before, but I knew it was not empty. I left the island that same day. The trip ended, and I returned home. I tried to focus on my work again, but my thoughts kept going back to that place. I tried to explain what I had experienced in a logical way. I told myself there had to be a reason, but nothing made sense. The blocked stairwell, the footsteps, the signs of presence where there should have been none. Years have passed since that day, but the memory has not faded. What stays with me the most is not the fear I felt in that moment. It is the feeling that something was already there long before I arrived, and it did not want me to see it. I took the night guard job because I needed quiet. The place was far from the city, deep in the countryside of the Midwest. There were long, empty roads, old wooden fences, and fields that stretched farther than I could see. The property I had to watch was an old storage yard with a small office building and a broken barn at the edge. No one came there anymore, but the owner still paid for someone to stay at night. That someone was me. The first night felt normal. The air was cold and the sky was very dark. There were no street lights, only the moon and my small flashlight. I sat inside the office and looked out the dirty window. The trees moved slowly in the wind. Every sound felt louder because everything else was so quiet. I told myself this was just part of the job. I had done night work before. I knew how silence could play tricks on the mind. Around midnight, I started my first round. I walked along the fence, checking the locks and the corners. My boots made a soft sound on the gravel. The barn stood far at the back, darker than everything else. I tried not to look at it too much. It had broken doors and empty windows, like a face with missing parts. I finished the round and went back to the office. Nothing felt wrong, but something felt heavy inside my chest. I ignored it. The second night was colder. The wind was stronger and it made the trees shake. I sat in the same chair and watched the same view. After some time, I noticed something small. The barn door was open a little more than before. I remembered seeing it almost closed the first night. I tried to think of a simple reason. Maybe the wind pushed it. That made sense. I did not want to think too much about it. When I went for my round, I walked slower than before. My flashlight beam moved over the ground and the fence. When I got closer to the barn, the air felt different. It was not colder, but it felt still, like the wind stopped there. I pointed my light at the door. It was open wide now. I stood there for a moment. I felt like I should go inside, but my body did not want to move. I stayed outside, looked around, and then turned back. I told myself it was not part of my job to go inside old buildings. The third night was when things began to change. I arrived early and checked everything before it got dark. The barn door was closed again. This made no sense to me. I knew I had seen it open the night before. I walked up to it and pushed it a little. It made a long, dry sound. Inside, it was empty except for broken wood and dust. I stepped in for a second and looked around. Nothing moved. Nothing felt alive. I left quickly and closed the door behind me. That night, I could not sit still. I kept looking at the barn through the window. The moonlight touched it in a strange way. It made long shadows that looked like they were moving, even when the wind was calm. I tried to focus on my phone, but my eyes kept going back to that building. Around 1 in the morning, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The barn door was open again. I had not heard anything. No sound of wood, no wind strong enough to push it. It was just open, like it had always been that way. I stood up slowly and walked outside. Each step felt heavy. The ground felt different under my feet, like it was softer. I kept my flashlight steady, but my hand was shaking. As I got closer, I felt that same still air again. No wind, no sound, nothing. I pointed the light inside. The beam moved across the empty space. Then I noticed something strange. The dust on the ground was not smooth anymore. There were marks. They looked like footprints, but not clear ones. They were uneven, like something had moved slowly in circles. I did not step inside this time. I just stood there and watched. A strong feeling grew inside me. It was not fear like before. It was something deeper, something that told me I should leave. I turned around and walked back fast. I did not run, but I wanted to. I locked myself inside the office and kept looking at the door. The fourth night, I almost did not come back. But I needed the money. I told myself I was just tired, that my mind was making things worse than they were. When I arrived, everything looked normal again. The barn door was closed, the yard was quiet. I tried to act normal. I made coffee and sat down. I looked at the clock again and again. Time felt slower. When it was time for my round, I waited a few extra minutes. I did not want to go out there. When I finally stepped outside, the air felt heavier than before. My flashlight felt weaker, even though the battery was new. I walked the same path, checking the same places. When I reached the part where I could see the barn, I stopped. There was something in front of it. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but it did not match anything around it. It was tall and still. It looked like a person standing, but it did not move like one. I could not see a face, only a shape darker than the night. I did not move. I did not breathe right. I just stood there and stared. The shape did not come closer. It did not go away. It just stayed there, like it was waiting. I slowly raised my flashlight and pointed it at the shape. For a second, the light touched it. There was nothing there, just empty space and the barn behind it. My heart was beating fast now. I felt cold all over. I lowered the light a little, and the shape was there again. I felt something change inside me. It was like my mind could not understand what I was seeing. I stepped back, one slow step at a time. The shape did not follow. It stayed in front of the barn. I went back to the office and locked the door. I did not look out the window anymore. I sat in the corner and waited for morning. Every small sound made me jump. I felt like something was watching me, even inside. The fifth night, I brought a stronger flashlight and kept all the lights in the office on. I told myself I would not go near the barn again. I would just stay close and finish the shift. But around midnight, something happened that I could not ignore. I heard a slow movement outside the office. It was not loud, but it was clear, like something dragging across the ground. I froze. The sound moved around the building, slow and steady. I looked at the door. The handle did not move, but I felt like something was right outside. I held my breath and listened. The sound stopped. After a long moment, I heard something else. Footsteps. They were soft, uneven, and slow. They went past the office, heading toward the barn. I did not open the door. I did not follow. I just listened until the sound faded. I stayed there until the sky began to turn light. When the sun came up, I stepped outside. The yard looked normal again. The barn door was closed, but the ground told a different story. There were marks in the dirt, long and messy, like something had been dragged. They started near the office and went all the way to the barn. I followed them slowly, my legs weak. When I reached the barn, I saw the door open just a little. I pushed it wider with shaking hands. Inside, the floor was covered with those same marks, circling again and again. In the center, there was a darker spot, like the ground had been pressed down many times. I felt that heavy feeling again, stronger than before. It filled my chest and made it hard to breathe. I turned and left the barn. I did not close the door this time. I walked back to the office, took my bag, and left the property. I never went back. Even now, I still think about that place. I think about the shape that was not there and then was there again. I think about the footsteps that had no owner. And sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I feel that same heavy stillness around me, like something is standing just outside, waiting in the dark.